Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after I gave birth. My daughter was asleep in the bassinet. Daniel was in the shower. His phone was on the kitchen counter. It lit up. I wasn't going to look. I never looked at his phone. But the preview was already visible on the screen. One message, one sender, my sister's name, and 11 words that ended 2 relationships at the same time. Last night was incredible. What are you going to tell Sofia? I stood in my kitchen, 6 weeks postpartum, my daughter asleep 3 feet away, the shower still running, and I read those 11 words 4 times, because the first 3 times, some part of me was still hoping I had misread them. I hadn't. My name is Sofia Reyes. I am 28 years old, and the person who betrayed me was not a stranger. She was the person I called when I was scared. She was the person I called when the pregnancy got hard. She was the person I invited into my home. My sister. My name is Sofia Reyes. I am 28 years old. I grew up in Hialeah, the part of Miami that is its own world, dense and loud and warm in a way that is not really about the weather, but about the people. About the specific density of Cuban and Colombian and Nicaraguan families who have built something together on the edge of a city that barely notices them. My parents came from Colombia when I was 3 years old. My sister Valentina was born here in Miami 2 years later, the American one, my mother always said, not as a criticism, but as an observation. Valentina had grown up with slightly less weight on her shoulders than I had, the first-generation weight, the prove-it weight. I had carried that weight well, I thought. I had a degree in nursing from FIU. I worked in labor and delivery, which, looking back on it now, has a particular irony that I've had to make peace with. I helped women through the hardest physical experiences of their lives, and then I went home to my own life, which I believed, for 4 years of marriage, was solid. Daniel Reyes, he took my last name, which was its own kind of statement, was 31. He worked in commercial construction, project management, the kind of job that kept him busy and paid well and gave him the specific confidence of someone who builds things and watches them stand. We met at a wedding, not glamorous, but right. Mutual friends, a reception in Coral Gables, a dance floor that was too small for the number of people, and Daniel standing at the edge of it, watching everyone else dance with the expression of someone who wanted to and hadn't found his reason to. I was the reason. We danced for 2 hours. We dated for a year. We got married when I was 24. 4 years of a marriage I would have described without hesitation as good. I need to tell you about Valentina before I tell you anything else, because Valentina is the person I loved most in the world, after Daniel, and then, when she arrived, after my daughter, and the distance between that and what she did is the part of this story I am still, 2 years later, working to hold. Valentina is 26, 2 years younger, the American one. She grew up alongside me, but slightly differently, lighter somehow, less burdened by the proving. She was funny in the way of someone who had always been allowed to be funny, who had never had to choose between making people laugh and being taken seriously. She was warm in the way of someone who had never had a reason not to be. She was my best friend. For 26 years, she was my best friend. And then the pregnancy got complicated, and I called her, and she came. The pregnancy was hard from the beginning. Not dramatically, not the kind of hard that announces itself, the quiet, grinding kind. Hyperemesis in the first trimester that kept me functional but depleted. a subchorionic hematoma at 16 weeks that required 2 weeks of modified bed rest, and a level of anxiety that I, as a labor and delivery nurse, was perhaps uniquely qualified to feel in its full dimension. Gestational hypertension at 30 weeks that required weekly monitoring and careful management. I was not sick. I was not in danger, not really, not with close monitoring, but I was not well, and I was tired in a way that went below the surface of tired. And Daniel, who worked long hours and was genuinely trying, and was also, I understand now, a person who found sustained domestic difficulty harder to manage than he would have admitted, was struggling. We had talked about help. My mother offered to come, but she was managing my father's health, and I didn't want to add weight to her. Daniel's family was in Orlando. Friends were working, living their lives. Valentina was between jobs. She had just finished a contract position at a hotel in Fort Lauderdale and was figuring out her next move. When I called her in my 7th month, called her the way I always called her, from the place where I kept the things I didn't say to anyone else, she said yes before I finished the sentence. "When do you want me there?" she said. "As soon as you can," I said. She arrived the following Friday. She slept in the guest room, the room we'd set up with a proper bed and its own bathroom, the room I'd painted soft white 2 years earlier during one of those weekend projects that felt at the time like building a life. She cooked, she drove me to appointments when I couldn't drive myself, she sat with me through the monitoring sessions that ran long, through the evenings when I was too tired to do anything but sit on the couch and stare at the television. She talked to Daniel about the baby, about names, about the nursery that still needed finishing, the conversations that I was too depleted to initiate and that she filled in my absence. She filled in my absence. I have thought about that phrase 1,000 times in the 2 years since. She filled in my absence. There were 3 hospital stays in the last 10 weeks. The first was at 30 weeks, blood pressure reading at my OB's office that sent us directly to the hospital. No detour, bag not packed. Daniel called from the parking lot. 26 hours of monitoring, medication adjustment, discharged with strict instructions. The second was at 34 weeks, 36 hours. The third was at 37 weeks, the final one, which ended with the planned induction and the birth of my daughter, Lucia. 4 hours of pushing, 6 pounds and 2 ounces, born at 4:17 in the morning with Daniel on one side of me, and by her own insistence when I'd called her from the hospital, Valentina on the other. She held Lucia first, after Daniel, before my mother, who arrived 2 days later. Valentina held Lucia first. I remember watching her face in that moment, the specific softness that comes over a person's face when they hold a newborn, the involuntary tenderness. I thought, she's going to be such a good aunt. I thought that, in the room where my daughter was born. Valentina went home the morning after Lucia was born. She needed a few days, she said, some things to sort out. She'd come back. I told her to take her time, that we were fine, that Daniel was there. Daniel was there. She came back 5 days later. I was home by then, healing, navigating the specific bewilderment of the first week with a newborn on 3 hours of sleep and a body recovering from labor. She moved back into the guest room. She helped with Lucia. She was, from all appearances, exactly what I had asked her to be. I had no idea what was also happening in my house. I want to be careful here, because this part of the story, the part where I should have seen something, is the part I have spent the most time interrogating. Did I miss signs? Probably. In retrospect, yes, probably. There were moments in those 6 postpartum weeks where I noticed something, a quality of interaction between Daniel and Valentina that was slightly different from what I expected. Not obvious, not the dramatic stuff of movies, just a kind of easy, unguarded quality that I attributed to the specific intimacy of people who have been in close quarters during a hard time. They had been. That was real. The hospital stays, the anxiety, the long evenings managing things without me, they had built something in that time. I thought it was the ordinary closeness of people who care about the same person and have been through something together. It was something else. But here is what I want to say about the missing the signs. I was 6 weeks postpartum. I had given birth after a 10-week medically complicated final trimester. I was nursing a newborn on 3 hours of sleep, healing physically, learning the specific vocabulary of my daughter's needs, managing the enormous cognitive load of keeping a new person alive. I was not at my most observant. I was not looking. I had no reason to look. The person in my guest room was my sister. The man in my bed was my husband. You do not lie awake at night looking for something you have no reason to expect. So I did not look until Tuesday morning, 6 weeks postpartum, Lucia asleep in the bassinet, the shower running, his phone on the counter. 11 words. The shower was still running. I read the message a 5th time. Last night was incredible. What are you going to tell Sofia? Last night. I thought about last night. I had gone to bed at 9:30. Lucia had been cluster feeding all afternoon, and I was depleted in a way that required horizontal stillness. Daniel had said he'd be up for a while, that he'd take the midnight feed so I could sleep. When I'd woken at 3 for the next feed, he'd been in bed. Nothing unusual, nothing to notice. Last night. I put the phone down, exactly where it had been. I walked to the window. Outside, the Miami morning, already bright, already warm. The particular light of a Tuesday in February in South Florida that is relentlessly beautiful, regardless of what else is happening. I stood at the window for approximately 90 seconds. Then, I went back to the phone. I opened the message thread. The thread went back 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Starting 5 days after Lucia was born. The day Valentina came back. I read the thread standing at my kitchen window with Lucia asleep 3 feet away, and the shower running and the Miami morning happening outside as if it had any right to be beautiful right now. I want to tell you what was in the thread, but I also want to be precise about what I'm willing to say here. Some of it belongs only to me. The specific sentences, the specific intimacies, the particular language between 2 people who believed they were alone in a thing. I will not reproduce those. What I will tell you is the shape of it. 6 weeks of messages, starting 5 days after my daughter was born. The early messages were careful, tentative, the way early messages in something that should not be happening tend to be tentative. Testing, feeling out whether the other person was going to be the one who stopped it. Neither of them stopped it. By week 2, the messages were not tentative. By week 4, there were things in that thread that I could not read past. I tried once and stopped, and I have never gone back. I knew enough. I put the phone down. I sat on the kitchen floor. Not dramatically. There was nowhere else. The stools were at the counter, the chairs were in the dining room, and my legs had done the specific thing that legs do sometimes when something enormous arrives all at once, which is simply decline to hold you up anymore. I sat on the kitchen floor. Lucia made a small sound from the bassinet. I looked at her. 6 weeks old. Her whole world was me. And I thought, with a clarity that surprised me given that I was sitting on the kitchen floor of a life that had just been comprehensively dismantled, I thought, she doesn't know anything is wrong. And then I thought, I need to make sure it stays that way for as long as possible. The shower turned off at 8:14. I know this because I had gone back to the counter, replaced Daniel's phone exactly where it had been, and was standing at the stove making coffee when I heard the water stop. I had approximately 4 minutes. I used them. I called my friend Isabella, a labor and delivery colleague, someone who had been through her own hard thing 2 years earlier, and who, on the other side of it, become the kind of friend who knows when a call at 8 in the morning is not an ordinary call. She answered on the second ring. I spoke quietly, too quietly for Daniel to hear from the hallway. Isabella, I need you to come here. Can you come here this morning? What happened? I need another adult in this house for the next few hours, I said. I can't explain yet. Can you come? I'm leaving now, she said. I hung up. I finished making coffee. I poured 2 cups. Daniel came into the kitchen at 8:18, dressed for work, hair still damp. He looked exactly like himself, the same face I had looked at for 4 years, unremarkable, ordinary, mine. Morning, he said. He kissed my temple. How'd Lucia sleep? Fine, I said. Coffee's ready. He picked up his phone from the counter. I watched his face as he looked at the screen. The message from Valentina was still there, still in preview. I watched him read it. I watched something happen on his face that I will not describe in detail because it belongs to the record of a moment that I lived and do not need to share completely. What I will say is that he looked up from the phone and looked at me, and something passed between us that was not words and did not need to be. He knew that I had seen it. Sofia, he said. Don't, I said. Isabella is coming. When she gets here, you're going to leave for work. We'll talk tonight. He looked at me for a long moment. Sofia, I need to... Tonight, I said. I need this morning. He left at 8:30. Isabella arrived at 8:52. Isabella walked in, looked at my face, and did not say a single unnecessary word. She went directly to the bassinet, picked up Lucia, held her, and said, I've got her. Go. I went to the guest room. Valentina was still asleep. I stood in the doorway for a moment. The guest room that I had painted soft white 2 years ago during a weekend project. The bed with the good sheets I'd bought specifically because I wanted the guest room to feel like a place someone could rest. The morning light coming through the window, the same Miami morning, relentlessly beautiful. My sister asleep in the bed I'd made for her. I knocked on the open door. She stirred, opened her eyes, saw me, and in the moments between seeing me and saying anything, her face did something. Not guilt exactly, though guilt was there. Something prior to guilt. The involuntary physical response of a body that has been keeping a secret and has just understood from a single look that the secret is over. Sofia, she said. Get up, I said. Get dressed, I'll be in the kitchen. I went back to the kitchen. I poured coffee I did not drink. Isabella looked at me across the room over Lucia's head and said nothing, which was exactly right. Valentina came in 10 minutes later. She was dressed, jeans, a shirt, her hair down, and she looked, I thought, very young, 26 years old and very young, and sitting down at my kitchen table like someone preparing for something they have no idea how to prepare for. I saw the message, I said. She closed her eyes. Sofia, I'm going to ask you one thing, and I need you to answer me honestly, not because I need the information, I have enough information, but because we are sisters and I'm asking you once directly. When did it start? She opened her eyes. She looked at the table. The second week, she said, when you were in the hospital, the 34-week stay. The 34-week stay. I had been in the hospital for 36 hours. My blood pressure had been elevated, and they had adjusted my medication, and I had lain in a hospital bed in the labor and delivery unit where I worked and watched the monitors and been afraid, quietly, the way nurses are afraid when they know exactly what the numbers mean. And in my house, 20 minutes away, during those 36 hours, Valentina, I said. I know, she said. Her voice had broken slightly on my name. I know, Sofia. I held your daughter, I said. You were in that room when she was born. You held her first. She did not say anything. I looked at her for a long time. Pack your things, I said. Isabella will take you to a hotel. I'll pay for a week. After that, you need to figure out something else. Sofia, I need you to leave my house today. I can't do this conversation today. Maybe not for a long time. She left by noon. Daniel came home at 6. Isabella had stayed the whole day. She had a week of leave saved, and she used it, without being asked, without complaint, simply present in the way that the best people are present when something terrible is happening, and there's nothing to be done about it except be there. When Daniel came in, she took Lucia to the nursery and closed the door. Daniel and I sat at the kitchen table. We sat there for a long time before either of us said anything. I had spent the day, in the hours when Lucia was sleeping, and the in-between moments when Isabella was there and I had permission to simply sit with what I knew, thinking about what I wanted to say. Not as a speech, not as an accusation, just what was true that I needed to say out loud. I need to understand one thing, I said finally. Not everything. I don't think I can hold everything right now. Just one thing. Daniel looked at the table. Did you love her? I said. Or was it something else? A long silence. No, he said. I didn't love her. Then why? I said. He was quiet for a moment. Because I was scared, he said. The pregnancy, the hospital stays, you not being yourself. I know that's not a reason. I know it's not an excuse. I was scared, and she was there, and I was scared, I said. Yes, he said. I looked at him. I was scared, too, I said. I was in the hospital. I was scared every day, and I called my sister, and I asked her to come help me because I was scared, and I needed someone. He didn't say anything. She was there for you, I said. And you... I stopped. I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need to. We talked for 2 hours. I will not take you through all of it. Some of it is mine, only mine, and some of it is simply the kind of conversation that happens when a marriage ends in a kitchen on a Tuesday evening while a 6-week-old sleeps in the next room. Which is to say, it is both devastating and, in its own strange way, very ordinary. People have this conversation in kitchens all over the world. The specifics are different, the shape is the same. What I want to tell you is what I said at the end of it, not the angry thing, not the things that came from the worst of what I felt, the things I have had to work through in the 2 years since with a therapist who has been patient and excellent. The last thing I said before I stood up and told him I needed him to sleep on the couch tonight and that we would figure out the practical arrangements in the coming days. I said, I invited her here for me. and she stayed for something else, and you let her, while I was in the hospital being afraid for our daughter." He did not respond. There was nothing to respond to. I was simply saying what was true. I stood up. I went to the nursery. I picked up Lucia. I sat in the rocking chair my mother had found at an estate sale and refinished herself, pale wood, worn smooth on the armrests, and I held my daughter in the dark, and I let the night be what it was. The following weeks were the most practically difficult of my life. Not emotionally. The emotional difficulty was there, enormous and nonlinear, the kind that doesn't follow a schedule and doesn't resolve when you need it to, and arrives sometimes at completely inconvenient moments, like a grocery store or a pediatric appointment, or 3 in the morning when Lucia has been fed and is back asleep and you are the only one awake in the house with your thoughts. But practically, the logistics of dismantling a shared life while keeping a 6-week-old alive and fed and held, that required a kind of sustained capacity that I am still, 2 years later, a little in awe of having managed. I called an attorney the following Monday. Her name was Patricia Gomez. She was recommended by Isabella, who had found her through someone at the hospital, another nurse who'd been through her own divorce 3 years earlier. Patricia's office was in Coral Gables, a 3rd-floor walk-up above a coffee shop, which I mention only because the smell of coffee in the stairwell became, over the following months, one of the most specific sense memories of that period. Patricia was direct in the way that good attorneys are direct, not unkind, but precise, the kind of person who tells you the actual shape of things without softening it into something unrecognizable. "Florida is a no-fault state," she said in our first meeting, which means the infidelity itself doesn't affect the division of assets, not legally. What matters is the length of the marriage, the assets involved, the child. Lucia changes things. "How?" I said. "Custody arrangement, child support, parenting plan. These are the center of everything now. What's your relationship with Daniel like outside of this?" I thought about it honestly. "He's a good father," I said. "Even these 6 weeks with Lucia, he's been present. He's been genuinely good with her." Patricia nodded. "Then the custody piece," she said, "is probably not going to be a war, which is good. Wars over custody are hard on children and expensive for everyone. What's your living situation?" I told her about the house, joint ownership, a mortgage with 3 years remaining, a decision to be made. "Do you want to stay in the house?" Patricia asked. I thought about the guest room, the soft white walls, the good sheets I'd bought specifically because I wanted the guest room to feel like a place someone could rest. "No," I said, "I don't want to stay in Miami at all." The decision to leave Miami was not impulsive. I want to be clear about that, because I think sometimes decisions that look sudden from the outside are the result of a long accumulation of smaller decisions, smaller realizations, things that have been true for a while, that finally arrive at a point where action is possible. I had been a Miami person my whole life. I had been a Hialeah person specifically, the neighborhood, the community, the specific world my parents had built. But I had also been, for 28 years, a person who had never lived anywhere else, who had sometimes wondered, in the abstract way that people who have always been somewhere wonder about the alternative, what it would be like to be somewhere different. I did not have to wonder anymore. I had a reason to find out. Nashville came up almost accidentally. A college friend, a woman named Carmen, who had left Miami 6 years earlier for a job in healthcare administration, had been texting throughout the worst of it, checking in, the way the best people do when they know something is hard, and there's nothing to fix, but presence matters anyway. One evening, when Lucia had finally gone down for a longer stretch, and I was sitting with a glass of wine I wasn't really drinking, Carmen texted, "You've mentioned wanting a new city. I'm just going to say it. "Come here. It's good here. And I'm here." I looked at that text for a long time. I looked at the Miami night through my window, the palms, the city glow, the warm darkness that had always felt like home. I thought, I could be somewhere cold. I could be somewhere with seasons. I could be somewhere where nobody knows the story except the people I choose to tell. I texted back, "Tell me about the cost of living." The divorce took 4 months. Patricia had been right about the custody piece. It was not a war. Daniel and I were, in the end, people who had failed each other badly and who both loved Lucia completely. And those two things lived in the same space without canceling each other out. We agreed on joint legal custody, primary physical custody with me, Daniel having Lucia for extended periods, holidays, summers as she got older, the specific architecture of a co-parenting arrangement that tries to give a child both parents while acknowledging that both parents no longer live in the same city. The house sold quickly. Miami real estate in the spring is reliable in that way. We split the equity. I gave my notice at the hospital in April. My colleagues, the units, the people I'd worked beside for 5 years, the nurses who had been in and out of my life through the pregnancy and the birth and the worst of what came after, threw me the kind of going away gathering that is half celebration and half genuine grief, the way send-offs are when someone leaves somewhere they were genuinely good at. My charge nurse hugged me for a long time at the door. "Nashville's getting lucky," she said. "I'm the lucky one," I said. "I just don't know it yet." Lucia and I left Miami on a Saturday in May. We drove. I had packed the car and a small trailer, the essentials, the rest going to storage to be shipped later. Lucia slept through most of South Florida, woke up somewhere around Gainesville, fell asleep again in Georgia. I watched the landscape change, the palms giving way to pines, the flatness of Florida giving way to the gentler rolls of Georgia and then Tennessee, the air coming in through the cracked windows shifting in that specific way that air shifts when you're somewhere genuinely different from where you started. I talked to Lucia the whole drive. She understood nothing. She looked at me from her car seat with the specific, untroubled attention of a baby who finds her mother's voice sufficient reason to exist contentedly in the world. "This is Georgia," I told her, "somewhere south of Atlanta. And this is Tennessee," I told her, "crossing the state line. And this is where we're going to live," I told her, pulling off I-65 into the Nashville suburbs, where Carmen had found me a rental house. Small, 2 bedrooms, a porch with a swing, a neighborhood that was quiet in a way Miami had never been. Lucia looked at the ceiling of the car. "I know, a lot." I called my mother from the Nashville driveway. She had known. I had told her in the broad strokes what had happened. Not everything. My mother is 61 years old and she has a heart condition, and there are things I decided carefully that she did not need to carry in the specific form they had arrived to me. She knew the marriage was over. She knew I was leaving Miami. She knew in the way that mothers know things that what had happened was bad. "Are you there?" she said when she answered. "We're here," I said. "Lucia's asleep in the back seat." A silence that contained more than silence. "Sofia?" she said. "I'm okay, Mommy," I said. I think I'm okay." "Are you?" I looked at the porch swing, the quiet street, the Tennessee afternoon, green, warm, a different quality of warm than Miami, something less relentless about it. "I think so," I said. "I'll know more in a few months." "Valentina." "Mommy," I said. "Not today." A pause. "Okay," she said. "Not today." We talked for 20 minutes about practical things, the drive, the house, what I needed to buy, whether the pediatrician I'd found came recommended, the ordinary scaffolding of a new beginning. When we hung up, I sat in the driveway for another few minutes. Lucia woke up and looked at me through the rear window of the car. "Ready?" I said. She made a sound that I chose to interpret as yes. I got out of the car. I lifted her out of her seat. I stood on the driveway of a house in Nashville, Tennessee, holding my daughter, and I looked at the front door, and I walked toward it. The first year in Nashville was the hardest, not because of Daniel or Valentina or any of the specific content of what had happened in Miami, but because starting over, genuinely starting over, in a new city with a baby, building a life from the first brick when you are 28 years old and have left everything familiar behind, is simply hard in a way that doesn't resolve quickly and doesn't care about the rightness of your reasons. Carmen was there. That mattered more than I can say. I found a hospital, I found a pediatrician, I found a grocery store and a coffee shop and a dry cleaner and the specific Tuesday morning playgroup that Lucia would eventually love. I built the ordinary infrastructure of a life, piece by piece, the way you build things, one piece at a time. And about 4 months in, on a Thursday evening when Lucia was asleep, and I was sitting on the porch swing with a cup of tea and the Tennessee fall doing something beautiful with the light, I heard my phone, a Miami number, Valentina. I looked at the phone for a long time. I had not spoken to her since the morning she left my house. I had not blocked her number. I did not know why I hadn't. Some instinct about keeping doors technically open even when you are not ready to walk through them. I looked at the phone, and I did not answer. But I did not put it face down. I let it ring, and I watched the screen, and the call ended, and I sat with the quiet for a long time. Lucia is 2 years old now. She runs, actually, with the specific, reckless confidence of a 2-year-old who has not yet fully internalized consequences. And she talks in the particular mix of English and Spanish that I have made a point of giving her, that my parents gave me, that goes in both directions and belongs to both worlds. She has Daniel's eyes. I have made peace with this. Not immediately, not all at once, but in the slow, non-linear way that peace actually arrives, not as a resolution, but as an accumulation of ordinary days in which the thing that hurt becomes, gradually, a thing that simply happened, and what you do with what happened becomes more present than the happening itself. Daniel flies to Nashville once a month. He stays at a hotel near the airport. We meet in a park, a good park, the kind with ducks that Lucia is obsessed with, and we hand off Lucia for the weekend. We are, 2 years out, what I would describe as competent co-parents. Not warm, not comfortable in the way of people who have forgiven everything, but functional in the way that matters most for Lucia. We can be in the same space. We can be kind. We can be focused on her. He remarried last spring. I found out from a mutual friend, the way you find these things out. I felt, when I heard it, a surprising amount of nothing. Not nothing as in I was suppressing something, nothing as in I had already moved far enough away from that version of my life that the news landed in a part of me that no longer held much weight. I called Carmen and told her. She said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it honestly. Like someone I used to know did something that doesn't really involve me, I said. That, Carmen said, is called healing. Valentina called 4 more times after I left Miami. I did not answer any of them. In January, 14 months after the Tuesday morning in my kitchen, she sent a letter. An actual letter, handwritten, 11 pages, which is Valentina. She has always gone long when she has something to say. I will not tell you everything in the letter, because most of it belongs to me. What I will tell you is that it contained two things that I had not expected. The first was honesty, real honesty, not the performed honesty of someone trying to achieve a specific outcome, but the specific, uncomfortable, self-aware honesty of someone who has spent 14 months sitting with what they did and is trying, finally, to say it accurately. She named what she had done. She did not explain it in ways that were designed to make it smaller. She named it. The second was something she had not said in my kitchen on the morning she left, that she had known in the hospital room when Lucia was born, that it was wrong. That, standing on one side of me, while Daniel stood on the other, holding my daughter before anyone else held her, she had known. She said so in the letter. She did not try to explain why she did it anyway. I read the letter twice. I put it in a drawer. I thought about it for a long time. I wrote back in February. My letter was shorter than hers, 3 pages, which is me. I said, I received your letter. I read it. I believed that you meant what you wrote. I am not ready to have a relationship with you. I don't know if I will ever be ready for the relationship we had. What you did happened in my house, during the most vulnerable period of my adult life, in the specific space between who you were to me and who I needed you to be. I don't know how to hold all of that at the same time as a relationship. What I want you to know is this. I am well. Lucia is extraordinary. Nashville is different from what I expected, and better. I have a job I love, and a friend who showed up, and a porch swing, and a 2-year-old who runs toward ducks. I am okay. I don't know what comes next between us. Maybe nothing for a long time. Maybe something, eventually, that neither of us can see the shape of yet. I am not closing a door. I am saying that I cannot walk through it right now. I hope you are well. I sent it. I have not heard back yet. That is okay. Some things take longer than 14 months. There is a moment in labor. I know this from both sides now, from 6 years of helping women through it as a nurse, and from Lucia's birth, when the work gets hardest right before it resolves. Not when you're exhausted, though you are exhausted. Not when you can't see the end, though sometimes you can't. The specific moment when the thing you've been working toward is the most present it's ever been, and the most painful, and the most near. My midwife during Lucia's birth said something to me in that moment that I have thought about many times in the 2 years since. She said, the hardest part is the part just before. Not, it's almost over. Not, you're almost there. Just, the hardest part is the part just before. I think about that sentence a lot. Not just about Lucia's birth, about Miami and the guest room, and the Tuesday morning and the message, and the 11 words that ended 2 relationships in a kitchen while my daughter slept. About the drive to Nashville, the first year, the letters. The hardest part is the part just before. I think I am past the hardest part. I don't know exactly what comes next. I know there is a porch swing. I know there are ducks in the park on weekends. I know Lucia runs toward them like they are the most important thing in the world, which to a 2-year-old on a Saturday morning, they absolutely are. I know I am still here, exactly where I am supposed to be. I just had to leave Miami to find out where that was. If you are in the guest room of something right now, if you are the person who made space for someone and had that space used against you, I want you to know the guest room is not the whole house. Your house is still yours. Build it somewhere new if you have to. It will still be yours. Thanks for listening.